I'm going to throw out to you guys is not for me. So I'm reading it so that I don't mess it up. Because I don't want to paraphrase it when someone took their time out to articulate it in a certain way. So today's quote is: live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever. So tonight's quote is: live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever. That's from Mahatma Gandhi. All right. And I'll say it one more time, just to make sure that you guys heard it. Live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever. You guys like that quote? Let me know. As per usual, I always ask you, do you think there's some truthful principle in that? And do you think it's something that can be a quote that you can actually use and would be applicable and helpful to developing long-lasting relationships, right? It's another one. Spark says, love it. Me too. I love that quote too. I'm with you. I'm with you on that one. I really, really like the quote. Hey, lovely. I'm so happy that you popped in for a moment with me, and congratulations on everything that you're doing, but your recent gala event. She has this amazing, check her out, Latrice Carpenter on IG. She's a coach, but on top of that, on top of that, she just did like a singles gala, and I believe it's in the DMV, and she does it, I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Latrice, but yearly. So definitely, if you missed this one, catch the next one, okay? Just look her up on IG, Latrice Carpenter, and check out whether it's for coaching or her event. Definitely worth. You'll find good content, and it just looked fab. I've never been there, but it looked absolutely fabulous. So congratulations on that. And it's another one. Spark says that's the only way to live, but so hard to achieve. Yeah, right. Absolutely, I agree with you. I think definitely the live like you're gonna die tomorrow. That's one that I always think about. And I guess it's I don't know if I want to call it a nice balance, where you kind of want to put that at the forefront because you want to pour out, at least for me, I want to pour out everything God has put inside of me. And we don't know, right? We don't know when the time will come for all of us, our appointed time to get our angel wings. So you want to, right? You want to be able to pour out all of it, but then you also want to be flexible enough and adaptable enough to kind of go and work with the flow of God, to not, I guess, become anxious in thinking that way. But I think it's particularly good to think that way in relationships because we can so easily take for granted the people in our lives, right? Or take for granted just our own life and our own purpose. So I think it's a really good quote to kind of keep at the center of your relationships, where it's like, okay, yeah, live like you're gonna die tomorrow and learn like you're gonna live forever. I really love the latter part of it because it's like, okay, fill yourself up, right? Fill yourself up, and it's that old adage, like never stop. There is no apex, so always continue learning. And I think that's really also an exceptional way to think when it comes to relationships, because we can easily, like I said, just take advantage of the people who we have in our lives, and we can also kind of sum our relationships up sometimes and think that there is no more to learn about that person when it's not really true. If we really are nurturing and cultivating our relationships, there's always more to learn, especially since as we elevate, we grow, and we become new creatures, new people, right? With new understanding, greater understanding. So I definitely agree. So far, I've had a unanimous that it is something that you can. Hey, Treasure, thank you for popping in. You didn't miss much. I just put out a quote at the top of the podcast like I usually do, which is by Mahatma Gandhi. And it says, live like you're going to die tomorrow and learn like you're going to live forever. So that's all that I put out. And now I have a question for you guys, and I have two questions for you guys tonight, and I'm curious to see how you guys are going to answer it. All right, so my two questions tonight. First question is, do you think that you're a person who tells people what they want to hear? Or do you think that you are a person who tells people what they need to hear? So that's the first question. Do you think that you're a person who tells people what they want to hear? Or do you think that you're a person who tells people what they need to hear? Like, what friend are you? Like, are you that friend where they know, okay, they might not call you often, but they know that if they need to hear the truth, that you are definitely going to be the person that's going to give them, right, a healthy dose of the truth. What would you say you are? Are you a person who tells people what they want to hear or what they need to hear, right? So that is the first question. And the second question is kind of tying in the topic that I wanted to talk to you guys tonight about, which is, do you, when you are thinking about yourself, do you, I don't want to pose the second question. Okay, I'm going to pose it like this, I think. You know what? I won't even pose the second question. I'm gonna put it in the, I'm gonna put it in the scenario tonight, and we'll put that second question there. So I'm gonna give a moment just in case you guys are thinking about that first question that I threw out, which is, do you consider yourself a person who tells people what they want to hear, or are you the person who tells people what they need to hear? All right. So while I'm waiting for you guys to maybe people are typing. I know it's another one, Sparks, at work, so maybe won't be able to type, et cetera, et cetera. But I will definitely tell you the person that I think that I am. I'm definitely the person who tells people what they need to hear more than what they want to hear. And that's been an interesting journey. I'll put it that way. I think in my younger years, like growing up, childhood and as a teen, I've always had that within me, but I've never, well, I mean, not say never, I didn't know how to articulate it. I don't feel like I've always been in a space where I could have articulated it in the best way and been able to translate my good intention behind it. And so I think oftentimes when I would try to say what I believe the person needed to hear, sometimes it would not come out in the best way. And now I'm looking back and I'm realizing that, you always kind of see the continuity. I always say to someone, you can always see kind of where God is kind of positioning you, how he's positioning you to serve and what your purpose is, because you can literally connect the dots and see the continuity of some of your skill sets and your gifts. And so I've been that way for a very long time, but I had no idea that eventually, as when I growing up, that I would at all be in any space to do any type of coaching in any way. Which with coaching, you get paid to tell people what they need to hear, not necessarily what they want to hear, and oftentimes that'll come in the way of just kind of helping them peel back some of the layers, or unfold certain things or connect certain dots that they might not have connected, and so. Thankfully, and I'm still growing and learning what is the best way to articulate it. And sometimes there are times when us as people, we can I guess, get in such a stupor, like basically live in such a way that you don't know you're so deeply in either a rut or deeply in a system that sometimes you have to say something in a direct way that will come, I guess, where someone will interpret it like it's very alarming to them because you had to tell them it very directly. But it was only because that was like the best way for them to kind of, almost like a shock, to get out of the pattern that they were in. So I'm definitely that person. And when you talk to my family members or my friends, they will tell you, yeah, I might not be the person that they, call all the time. But definitely when they need to work through some things, assess some things, that they know that they can call me. And I guess it's a good thing, and sometimes it can, I don't want to say be a bad thing, but sometimes at least in my experience, it can sometimes feel lonely because it depends on where the person is, whether they want to hear, whether they want to hear the truth or not. And so they might not necessarily want to call on you until they've come to a certain space where they're okay with hearing certain things. So definitely that's me. I'm definitely the person who tells people what they need to hear, not necessarily what they want to hear. So that is, how I am. So let me see. It's another one. Spark says agreed. So maybe he's agreeing with me, saying that he's a person that tells people what they need to hear, not necessarily what they want to hear. And I appreciate people like that. I guess that's where they say you don't want to have a whole bunch of like yes me people around you. You don't want to have people who aren't going to, earnestly tell you truthfully what they're thinking, because then at least that'll help you, right? That'll help you whether you're working on a project or you're working on yourself and trying to transform. You want someone who at least bottom line, they're going to be honest with me, and I can take that honest feedback or that honest information and then take it from there, right? And work with it. So I would rather have people who tell me what I need to hear rather than necessarily what I want to hear, because then that's just going to prohibit my growth, right? It's just going to prohibit my growth. So, all right, so let's put out the scenario that we're going to be talking about tonight. And I want to see what your thoughts are. Tonight's topic of discussion, what I wanted to talk about was the difference between being jealous and territorial in relationships. And so I'm probably going to maybe do this a little bit differently than what I usually do. Normatively, I'll give out one scenario, but I think I'm going to give out a couple just to get your thoughts on this. So the first scenario surrounding this topic is you have, a man and a woman. They're out on, let's make it their second date. They're dating, getting to know each other, and they're out on their second date. And on the second date, they're having conversations, getting to know each other, and learning about each other. And one of the statements that the gentleman makes to, the young woman is that, I'm very territorial. I'm very territorial, when it comes to the people that I love and the people that I care about and when I'm in relationships. And so after, they continue their date and they finish their date, she comes back and she talks to her friend and she tells her friend basically what the guy said to her, that, when it comes to relationships and people I care about, I'm very territorial. And she's explaining to her girlfriend that for her, that kind of sent off a red flag for her, that he would tell her that he's very territorial. And also she felt like, on the second date, you're telling me this? And her friend says, well, no, I don't think that is really a red flag. I think, there's a difference. It's not like he said he was jealous. He just said he was territorial. And there's a difference. And she begins to explain to her, she says, jealousy, that's different. That's someone's fear, someone's insecurity. And yeah, that would be a red flag. But someone saying that they're caring about something that they feel that they've been given, and they want to be a good steward over is not. So that's the first scenario. So my question to you guys, and hopefully we'll answer it through kind of assessing the situation. Do you feel, I guess, do you agree with the girl who was on the date? Let's call her Sonia. I don't know. I'm giving a random name. Do you believe that she's kind of right? It's like, okay, we just starting to get to know each other, and on a second date, he's telling me he's territorial. And so for that, for me, it's kind of a little alarming. Or do you agree with the friend who talks to her and lets her know, like, well, no, there's a difference between someone being jealous versus someone being territorial in a relationship? Yeah, so let me know what your thoughts are. Hopefully I explained that well enough. Let me try to surmise a little bit more clearly and quickly for you guys, right? So two people, man and woman, on a date. They're getting to know each other. Second date, the guy, in their conversation of getting to know each other, he tells the young lady that he is territorial over the people, that he loves. And when he's in relationships, that is a red flag for her. And she continues with the date, to be amicable. But after that, she talks to her friend and expresses to her friend what he said, and how it was somewhat alarming to her. But her friend says she doesn't feel like that's a red flag. He's just explaining that he's territorial. And so there's a difference between being territorial and jealous. So what do you guys think? What are your thoughts? Let me know. Hopefully I've got some of you guys still with me. And Lamo Bree, hi. Thank you for, I hope I pronounced that right. Thank you for joining the show. So what are you guys' thoughts on that? Do you guys feel like there's a difference between someone being jealous in a relationship versus someone being territorial? And, I think this is an interesting conversation because I think anybody who has people that they love, who are in their, who they feel like have been given to them for them to be stewards over, wants to protect them. So I'm just curious, see what your thoughts are on it, on that particular situation. Do you think that the girl who was on the date, she's right? Like, okay, no, this is like the second date and you're telling me you're territorial. That's a no-go for me. Or do you think that the friend is right, that it's different when someone's jealous versus someone being territorial over the people that they love? So I'm gonna give a minute just in case you guys are typing, just so I can get some, see if there's any feedback. And if not, then I will chime in. And then, of course, as you're typing, because I know some of you guys might be still at work, I will read your comments when they come in. So I'll give it a moment. Make sure I'm not missing any comments here. And as I was thinking about preparing this topic for you guys, I came across, and I'm going to read it for you guys because I thought it was interesting. There was actually 2 articles that I came across that I want to read for you guys to see what your thoughts are on it. Right, so one of the articles that I came across when I decided to bring this up to you guys made an interesting point, which I thought was interesting that I want to present to you guys. It said, when someone's jealous, the focus of jealousy is actually about yourself, right? Or the person who is, I guess struggling with the jealousy. Whereas when someone's territorial, it's the focus is not themselves, right? It's because they care about another person's well-being. So that was one of the things that I read that I thought was interesting. And there was another article. I'm going to see if I can pull it up here so I can read some of it to you guys. Right, and so I pulled it up for you guys. I'm gonna read a little snippet from it because, like I said, I thought it was so interesting, and I liked the example that they gave in this article because this person was actually talking about, anybody who is a pet owner here who has dogs. This person was talking about their dog and how, and this article was particularly talking about the difference between being protective versus territorial. And he used the example, and I just want to give this person their flowers. So if you guys want to look it up, this is from unleash-love.com is where I saw the article, just in case you want to check it out. I definitely thought it was a great read, hence why I wanted to bring it up to you guys. So in the article, she was talking about the pet that she has, her dog, and she said that basically, her pet, every time someone comes to the door, starts barking, starts growling, et cetera, et cetera. And she was like, no matter how much she's trained the dog not to do this, it does it every single time, right? It does it every single time, even though there has, thankfully, thank God, never been, right, anyone who's an intruder, anyone who has come to hurt them in any way. It's just the usuals, mail carrier, etc., someone coming to deliver something. But it doesn't matter because every single time, right, the dog comes. And the interesting statement that I thought, or comparison that or contrast really, that I thought she made in the article was that she was finding it interesting that he only did this, right, when they were at home. He only did it at home. He never did it when they were outside and someone else came up to her, or if she talked to another dog or anything like that, So he was just being territorial over their home, their space, and someone coming into that. But he's not necessarily thinking of being protective all around. So I thought that was very interesting. And the article also, because I like to introduce things that I always tell you guys, it's not necessarily just for intimate relationships, but any dynamic, or it's basically life principles that you can apply all around. And she used this example in the article to then say that people, right, us human beings, seem to be naturally territorial when it comes to not only the people we love, but she also began to talk about the ideas that we have, right? The ideas that we, come up with, and how she was expressing in the article that sometimes she would, because of her being territorial, it would cause her to not want to share the ideas that she comes up with in fear that someone else was going to take the idea and run with it and not give her credit, which is, right, that happens all the time. And I so related to when she said that in the article, because I know for me, there were times that, I would go on, whether it was Clubhouse, and say certain things, and then you start hearing other people say those things and not necessarily, give you, I guess, the credit for, where they got it from and where they heard it from. And I always quote the book, and I always forget the author's name, but it's a book called Tribe. And I love this book because he talks about how, basically finding your tribe and also finding the people who ears are tuned in, literally attuned for what you have to say or what you have to offer, and how it's unfortunate in modern day culture that people are afraid to express their ideas for that very reason, because they don't want someone else to take it when ideas are meant to be spread, you know. And I'll say one of the lines that she said in the article, which I thought it was great. She said, "It is humbling to realize that a behavior is very unbecoming." She's talking about being territorial. "We humans are so often territorial when we think we have a great idea, a unique method, or a new creation." And she said, "An old expression often brings me back to reality, that there is nothing new under the sun." And she said, "For humans to want to protect their turf is normal, but just because it is typical or normal behavior does not mean it is acceptable." And hey, Emily, how are you, darling? Thank you for joining me. And she said, "Now, if I can, wait, I'm sorry. Let me make sure. Yeah, sorry, I just got a little. Hey, Emily." She said, this is a model that she shared in the article that she was afraid to share at first because she thought that somebody would take that model. So she said, "I shared the Louis model because it is a really great model and not mine to hoard. It was gifted to me by the one who blessed me with Louis, which is God. And I believe God wants me to give freely to others the gifts with which he has blessed me." Right. So I wanted to read that too. Hey, thank you. She said, "I like your shirt. Thank you." So I thought that was great. What she's saying, basically what she's saying is that, you know, the things that we are gifted with and the ideas that we have are not our own to hoard, right? But it is to share with the world. And I love the fact that, you know, she's using this example, but we can also use this example when it comes to our relationships, right? So first, let's just talk about the difference between, you know, because I haven't really heard any comments. Let me make sure that I'm not missing any based on the situation that I put up. And Emily, I just put out the situation for tonight, the relationship scenario. It's real short. Basically, two people going out on a date, a man and a woman. On the second date, he tells her that he is territorial over, the people that he loves. And when he's in relationships, she goes through the rest of the date, but after she finishes the date, she talks to her friend and lets her friend know what he said about being territorial about over the people that he loves, and that it was a red flag for her. It was basically a red flag. And her friend says, "Well, no, I don't think that should be a red flag. You know, it's not like he said he's a jealous person, and there's a difference between being jealous and territorial." Right. So that's the relationship Sunday scenario that I put out for tonight. Now, just asking everyone, do they agree with the girl who went on the date where it's like, okay, no, he's telling me this, it's the second date, it's definitely a red flag. Or do you agree with her friend that says, no, it's not really a red flag? There's a difference between someone being jealous and someone being territorial in the relationship. And one of the differences that I put out tonight was that, and asked everyone if they agreed, was that when it comes to someone being jealous, it's really just about themselves, right? Whether it's their fears, their insecurities. Jealousy is definitely just a possessiveness that the person wants to have, whereas someone being territorial is more of, okay, caring about the well-being of the others that are brought into their space and brought into their lives. So that's what we're talking about tonight. Hey, Inspiring Her, thank you for joining us. So that's what we're talking about tonight. So feel free to let me know what your feedback and what your thoughts are. Do you where you land basically when it comes to that scenario. And I think it's a really good conversation, not only to have when you're talking about relationships, but like I said, in also bringing up other examples of how being territorial over something can actually prohibit progress and growth. Because before you guys, Emily and Aspiring Her came in, I was sharing an article that I was reading about the difference between someone being territorial and being protective. And the person used the example of their dog and training their dog, and how their dog, when they're home, is barking like crazy, growling, etc., because they are territorial over the land, right? And that's really, at the essence, what territorial means. It means you are, you know, defending and protecting land that you believe is yours. So you are going to, be territorial over that space. And the difference that she highlighted was that she noticed that when she went out with her dog, if another dog came up to her, or if she, somebody else came up, he wasn't doing the same thing. So she noticed that, okay, yeah, this dog is just being territorial in our space, but not necessarily overall protective. So I thought that was a great kind of simplistic way to identify the difference in those words. Anyone who has come to this podcast before knows that I love to examine the micro details and nuances in words. So that's the difference when it comes to those two words of being territorial and being protective. And I think also in the example that she used about how, in her own reflection of herself, that she can be territorial so much over an idea that she won't even want to share it. But the ideas were not given to her to just hoard it, but also to share it with the world. And I think when it comes to relationships, I think we also have to, or it's helpful to think about it in that way, right? Because especially when you've been, hey, Rada, thank you for joining, especially when you have been giving something or someone in your life, and that person who has come into your life, it brightens up your life, loves you in a certain way, you want to, right? You want to protect that person at all costs. You might even want to just have or experience that person all to yourself because of it. But I think when it comes to relationships, one of the best things that we can do to understand and love each other authentically in the best way is to understand that, yes, those people, your husband, your wife, your spouse, etc., even your children, those people have been given to you as gifts. But they also have a purpose on their life, and they are, even if you're the main person, right, that they're engaging with, there is also, right, this purpose that they have to do here and be. And so I think of, especially those of you who have some biblical knowledge, that Paul in the Bible, he says, it's better when he's talking. He's not saying God is saying this. He's saying it, that it's better for you. I'd rather you not marry, because the person who is married has to be worried with the cares of the world and things like that, whereas someone who is not can just kind of do the things that God has called them to do. And I think the conversation that we're having tonight is one of the main reasons that would, inspire him to say that. Because sometimes, and I put this in my book, 7 Stages of Love and Relationships, that when you have people who have connected to each other on a deep level, especially when it's elevating into marriage, right, that now you will have people, what's the word I'm looking for, where their purpose, where their loyalty, and for them not wanting to feel like if they have a connection with another person, for the sake of either keeping the peace or for the sake of not wanting it to be taken in the wrong way by their partner, they will literally thwart, their purpose will be thwarted in that moment if they had to say something to that person, if they had to connect to that person a certain way because of not wanting to maybe offset certain things in their relationships, so and let me not paraphrase it. I'll read you guys one portion of the way that I wrote it in my book so that it's understandable. Hey, he's got popcorn. Well, I'm glad. You're thinking of this like a movie, Rada. I appreciate it. So let me read it exactly how I wrote in the book so that you guys can have an understanding of what I'm saying, right? So we know that, of course, the person that you meet that becomes your partner is someone who you deeply connect with on a certain level. And so you commit to, being with them for, well, thank you. When you commit to being with them, right? That's the partner, that's the person you choose to be with for the rest of your life. But I put in the book that there is sometimes people can have selfish loyalty, even when it comes to their spouse, because, right, I said in the book, the union of marriage should not be used to prohibit yourself or your partner from naturally connecting to others, right? That can be considered like selfish loyalty. Selfish loyalty is in a partnership can blindly hinder and derail the fulfillment of your purpose and the collective purpose of your union, right? Your partner's connection to someone else does not devalue or lessen their connection with you. And let me say that again, because that is something that comes up. Often, your partner's connection to someone else does not devalue or lessen their connection with you. Right? And sometimes that's hard because you have, and I always talk about when you're coming on, at least my lives and listening to my podcast, I introduce things that are fundamental principles that can come off lofty to, for people to achieve, right? Because they're rooted in godly principles. They're fundamental principles that can be used across the board. So it is going to take more of you leaning into your spirit and leaning into things that are of a higher consciousness to do. Right. So, yeah, you'll have people who come into relationships and maybe they're struggling with jealousy. Right. There's no judgment here. This is just to kind of assess where you are in it. So, yeah, if you are someone who's struggling with jealousy, it's great. I do agree with the point that we made earlier on that jealousy is more about yourself than it is more about the well-being of the other person. Right. It's more about like, no, I don't want you to have this, or I don't want you to do this because of a fear or insecurity that I have. It's not me necessarily caring about your well-being. And the example that I can think about, I have a beautiful best friend, God bless her soul. She passed away way too young and way too early. But I remember, and I've always been a friend like this, where it's like jealousy isn't my thing, whether it's friendship or intimate relationships. I've been very secure in myself, even though I don't always think that I'm, I'm not the prettiest or, you know what I mean? Like, I know that there are people that there's always going to be someone prettier. There's always going to be someone, more highly intelligent and things like that. So, but I never really worried about that. I just kind of stayed in my own lane, in my own place. So I didn't really struggle with that. And the friend of mine that passed away, she was gorgeous, beautiful girl. And I remember one time coming from high school, walking to her house, because I would go to her house often after high school, and we would hang out. And I remember this guy was like following me, because he wanted to try to talk to me. And I kind of ignored him because I didn't really know who he is or anything like that. And I kind of was hoping to go quickly to her house, just thinking of safety. But yeah, so he literally followed me all the way to her house. And I remember I got to her house, and ironically, it was a guy that she like dealt with, that she that she had somehow, I don't know if they actually went out or not. And I was telling her what happened, that he was following me. He didn't even care. He just was. I remember us being out there, like looking at him down from the window, and he was like, I came here for her. Like I want to talk to her, not you. I was coming here to talk to her, and she just like read him his rights. She just she was like, no, that's my friend, and she doesn't want you, and et cetera, et cetera. And I thought it was so interesting, and she told basically she was doing it because she felt like that she was territorial over him. She was like, even if they're not together, she didn't want, me to, not that I was anyway entertaining him like that, but she was like that, and I remember even we had a friend who, if it was like someone who was leaning more towards liking me, she would come and she'd say, something and be like, oh, you shouldn't date him because blah, 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 and then next thing I turn around and she would be dating him, right? And it wasn't a big thing for me because I wasn't, like I said, I didn't struggle with jealousy, but when it was on the other foot, right? She was like, she wasn't having it. And I've moved like that in friendships where it's like, okay, well, I'm like how I am and I'm not going to change. And I felt more freedom moving the way that I moved, not feeling, like that way. And I don't know if I should call that jealousy. I don't think it's jealousy, or maybe that's more of a territorial thing. But I just felt more free moving the way because I felt like what's for me is for me, and it's not, I'm not going to lose that if God has it for me. And if it's not for me, then it's not. And it panned out that it worked well that way because those people, those guys definitely didn't turn out to be the type of guys that I would have wanted to be with. So, but in a situation like that, right, that's a friendship dynamic where that's going on. And even in that dynamic, even though I'm like open and free and I'm okay and I'm not taking it any way, looking at her in any way, it can come to a point where it's like, if that was, a person that I, needed or was ordained by God in some way to kind of help or talk to in a friendship like that, it would be very hard to do that, right? Because that person has their own intentions. They have their own methodology about, being territorial and what they think is rightfully theirs. And so I think about that because you can put that in the context of an intimate relationship, right? And you can have a person who feels like, okay, well, you are mine, right? Let's take it a step further from jealousy. Jealousy, we know, is about the person. That's your own insecurity, your fears, right? It's not necessarily about the well-being. It's more so of the possessiveness that's being fueled by your own insecurity and fear. So we know it is what it is, right? Let's just say that's the lower totem pole of things. And let's say, right, the second tier, the second step up is, okay, I'm not jealous, but I am territorial, right? I'm territorial over things that I feel like are mine, right? And that's better because I guess you're thinking more so about the well-being of the people who are around you. But you can also, in that, still prohibit that person from fully walking in their purpose and doing what they're supposed to do. Because if, like what I wrote in my book, that if you feel like that person's connectivity or the connection that has to be made when you're serving other people, when you are walking and doing things in your purpose, real connections can't be made, right? Or real relationships can't be developed without real connections happening. So if you're with a person who says, well, no, I'm not jealous, but I'm territorial, and that them being territorial now, makes them feel a certain way, if you're connecting to another person, then that could be an issue, right? Especially depending on what you've been called to do. There's certain people like pastors, people who are in politics. There's so many different industries, even in entertainment, right? We just had a whole bunch of memes put out there because of the Usher and Alicia Keys thing and Swizz Beatz, right? Even in that arena, there are certain career paths and certain things that require people to be around a lot of other people and require for connections to really be made. Ghost Rider says, I gotta start locking up shop here at work, but I want to tell you that have a great Kings for this. I'm probably reading that wrong. I don't know. But thank you, Rada. Thank you so much for joining. Definitely lock up shop. Have a good night. Thank you for joining for a moment. Right. So in the situations like that, it's basically what I'm saying is that if the fact of someone being territorial starts to prohibit what God is telling either the person to individually do in the relationship or collectively do in the relationship, then that becomes an issue. That becomes an issue, right? So we have assessed the difference between someone being jealous and someone being territorial, right? And I just want to go back to the example that the lady gave in the article because I think it's so true and so pertinent to the culture that we're in right now, right? Where she wasn't even talking about someone else who's in her own life. She was talking about how being territorial over her own ideas have prohibited her from doing, and sharing the things that God has given her to share. And so when we're thinking about that and when we're in the relationships that we have, once we continuously remember that the person that you're with, your spouse, your husband, your wife, they are a gift that God has given to you on borrowed time, right? They are a gift that God has given to you on borrowed time. And they most definitely a gift that you should cherish, a gift that you should love to your fullest capacity. But that marriage is second to the purpose of God that is on that person's life, right? And hear me out before before the alarms start coming like, oh, no, Charlotte. Does that mean it will be detached from the marriage? No. Right? It should be definitely integrated with the marriage. But what I'm saying is that sometimes if we are going to have, I guess, our process of how we feel like we are protecting our relationship now seeps in to the point where now that person cannot do and fulfill certain things that God wants them to fulfill, then that becomes an issue. That becomes an issue. That's what I'm saying, right? Of course, we know the marriage and the things that we have to do, and God pour out from that fundamental, right, system of marriage, fundamental institution of marriage. But it is important for you to understand that before that person is your husband or your wife, they're a child of God first. I'll share something with you guys that I share often in my Forever Friends Academy group membership. I have a group membership by subscription-based membership, and we have, our private meetings every week. And I share with them that when it comes to my husband, the way that I think of him, his title of being a husband to me is the very last thing I think about when I think about him, and when I engage with him, I let this, I guess this process of thought lead and influence the way that I engage with him and navigate our relationship. And it's very helpful, I think, in thinking, and you guys can let me know, of course, give me the feedback, if you think that this way of thinking in this process would help you in the way that you engage in your relationships, so that jealousy and being territorial to the point where you're prohibiting that person from doing what they're, purposed and born to do by God, just because of the position that they've vowed to take on with you. This is a way that you can kind of combat that if that comes into play. So I'll tell them that the first thing I think about when I think about my husband is that he's a child of God. Before he is my husband, he's a son of God, right? Because there are many things in life that has happened to him that has, so many things have happened before I came into his life. And by the way, we started out so young. There's a lot of life that we've lived together instead of individually by ourselves. But I still understand that there are so many actions, so many thoughts, so many things that had to come into play and had to align exactly in the way that they had to for him to come into my life, right? And so I don't disregard any of that. I honor all of that process that led him to come into my life. So that's first things first. He's a son of God, right? So that means there are certain things that God purposed him to do here, right? So I hold that in high regard. So that's first. And then second, he's a soul. And the reason why that's second is because, right, we all come with our things, right? We all come with our things based on our life experiences, right? Our life experiences. And so when we all are going through either our processes of healing or processes of recovery, when I think of him as a soul, I remember like, okay, yeah, before he came into my life, there were things, ways that he was nurtured in his childhood, so things that, right, have helped him be the person that he is today, right? So if he's going through a transition, I remember that. Right? I remember that, and I don't, that helps me to not take it personal. That helps me to understand that just like me, he also has, right, processes that he has to go through and transformations and things like that. Right? So that is helpful in allowing the grace to come in when we are going through seasons of transition and elevation and where growing pains has to occur and things like that. It affords grace to him as well as to myself, right? And then third is a friend. He's a friend after that, right? He's a friend. And I think that's important because, especially in a time where you hear people getting divorced many times over and over because of irreconcilable differences. I think a good portion of the reason why people end up in divorces like that is because the friendship and the relationship, man, just has not, was either not there from the beginning in the foundation, or they forgot how to be friends with each other. They forgot. And a great part about being a friend is that you want the best for that person in life overall. I just was listening to a podcast earlier on today where a pastor was talking about something that my husband and I, we always talk about. And he was saying how, people will pray for their spouses or pray that their partner will be a certain way, and he's like, that's not, what he called in the podcast that was witchcraft. Like you can't come and pray to God to want someone to be a certain way or do a certain thing. That's manipulation, right? Even though you're coming by the way of prayer. And my husband and I, we always talk about that, and I've said it many times in my coaching sessions where I, have talked to people who felt like their relationships failed, and they were wondering why, because they were taking it to prayer quite heavily. And one of the reasons why I'll say, well, yeah, it failed because you presented the ideal person that you wanted that person to be. You didn't necessarily say, okay, God, have your way and your will be done. It's no, this is what I feel would be the most ideal, optimal result in this. And so that's what I'm going to pray. And that's not really, it wouldn't, right? It wouldn't bring that result to you because now you're trying to manipulate situations and control it, even though it's in prayer. And so in that, you have to kind of, as I say all the time on this podcast, relationships are as an as is type of situation. You have to accept that person, and then you can pray to God that, have your way in that person's life, and who you call them to be, allow them to be that. That's a different prayer, So in that same sense, when it comes to my husband, that's my prayer for him. It is for him to, be all that God has called him to be, even if that means, for some reason, I don't think this would happen if we're both aligned in God, but even if it meant like for him to be without me, and that's not an easy thing. Like I said, it's not an easy thing to do, especially if you're with someone who God has given you and that person is loving you to in such a beautiful way, right? In such a beautiful way, you want that person to be with you always, and you want that person, you want to experience that person. And most definitely we can feel like, okay, yeah, that's ours and that's mine and I own that person, and et cetera, et cetera. And don't get me wrong, I feel like my husband is mine. But I say that with all truth and knowing that he's God's first, and God gave him to me, and that's the gift that God gave me, and I don't have ownership over him. That's what makes me grateful, because he's choosing to be here with me every single day. He's choosing that. And that's what makes the relationship beautiful, because I know that's the truth, that he doesn't own me and I don't own him. But we do go to, right, God the Father who's the creator of both of us, and pull from that source to help guide us to choose each other every single day. So when I think of it like that, then the protection of my relationship really comes from the honor of cherishing this gift that God has given me, this gift that God has given me. And I think, and I always say it on the podcast, that you can't protect yourself better than love can. So the best way that you can protect your relationship is to, learn the nature of love, which is learning the nature of God. Because I think of myself as a mother, and I think of me in my life, in my childhood, that I didn't have my mom and my father to raise me, especially the younger years of my life. And I think about, even though I went through some things, God still kept me, though. He still kept me to the point where I can be who I am today and live the life that I have. And so when I look at my children and I think about, okay, I'm definitely, protect them and nurture them and things like that, with the understanding that there's going to be a point where I can't, well, it's already happened. I can't be with them everywhere they go. I don't have that power, but God does. God has that power and he has that authority. So the moments where I can be with them, he can. And so a lot of my prayers go in that direction, of thanking God for just, having angels in their life that I know will protect them beyond what my natural physical protection can do. So I think in ways, doing things like that is better, and more beneficial than, starting from a place of course, jealousy, and then the second tier of being territorial. Now, don't get me wrong, there are, And when I think of the word territorial, the first thing that I thought of when I was thinking of this word is my husband when he walks with me on the street. When we started out as teenagers, and was really young, and I didn't grow up with my father, and I didn't have a lot of male presence in my life. So when he did this, it was like, it was new to me. I'll just say that it was new to me. We used to walk. And he's from the city, he's from New York, and he would take me out, to go wherever we were going, and he would walk on the outside of me. He would kind of if I was on the outskirts, near where the cars were, he would nicely kind of pull me to the side, pull me over, and then walk, on the outskirts, so that if there were any cars and things like that, it wouldn't hit me. And at first I was just like, what is this, because I didn't know. So in that way, I guess, where being territorial, being protective, more so, I'm not saying that you don't do those things and you don't do what's necessary to protect your family. But what I am saying is definitely to assess where, if you say that I'm just a territorial individual over the people and my loved ones, that being territorial does not now prohibit that person from loving you to their fullest capacity and being with you and keeping their vow to you, and also sharing what God has given them to the rest of the world, because it shouldn't diminish their connection to someone else, should not diminish or devalue their connection to who God has aligned them to be with you. And that's not an easy process. It's not. It takes a lot of trusting. It takes a lot of trusting on both ends to do that. But just like in the example that I gave with my friend, where I felt like I didn't have a problem if I guess the relationship wasn't equal in that way, where she felt, I accepted for her for who she is and how she was. And, I think it was easy for her to accept me for who I was, because it kind of was like, okay, well, she's not like that. She's not territorial, so it's not a problem, But in that relationship, I guess I didn't have a instance. Now you're gonna make me kind of reflect, to kind of look back at all the different times. But as far as what I can remember right now, it wasn't a situation or incident where her being that way prohibited me from connecting with people that I was supposed to on a deeper level, in a deeper way. Of course, I was really young, so a lot of my understanding that I know now, to even articulate, I didn't have it then. But as we get older, and of course we have to handle, whether it be our careers or, like I said, do be able to exist and walk in our purpose, right? We need that. And sometimes when we have people who definitely, if they're jealous, most definitely is going to stop you from walking your purpose. That's outright, period, right? But two, if someone is territorial and they are doing it in the name of protection because, you are theirs, that's fine. Wanting to protect the person that you love, I think it's more so the methodology and the process, and making sure that in the way that you're thinking, you're protecting, that you're not hindering what God has called that person to do. Because we have to remember that in order for us to show up in the world and serve, in order to make real, valuable relationships and real connections have to be made. So if you're with a person who hinders those connections from being made, then it's going to be a problem in you being able to do what God has called you to do here. And that's the issue. Hence why Paul wrote that in the Bible, like, well, I'd rather you not marry because, you're not only are you going to be concerned with the cares of the world, right? But they're very understanding that when people get together, that there is a certain possessiveness that can kind of get in the way. And there is selfish loyalty that can sneak up to where the relationship or the position that that person has taken on now gives them the right to say, you can't, do this. And I think and maybe you're someone who's listening to this and you're like, okay, well, how do I know, right? How do I know the difference, especially when it comes to being territorial and being protective? Because jealousy, we kind of clearly stated, we know that that's someone who it's all about themselves. It's not necessarily caring about necessarily the well-being of another person. It's more of moving through insecurity or fear that the person is either going to move on or, go to someone else, etc. But one of the ways that you can know is what I said, which is basically having to learn the nature of love and learn the nature of God, because then when there are situations and instances that come up, right, if someone's saying something to you, it's going to, when you think of it holistically, the truth is what hopefully both partners will collectively lean towards. So I'll give an example that I read on one of the articles because I thought it was a really good example. And then we will close on out for tonight. Yeah. So on one of the articles, the person put that if, sorry, I want to make sure I'm reading it right. It says if the person is, you are being jealous, you don't like your partner to go to a bar without you because you are afraid that she will meet other men and end up leaving you. However, if you don't like your partner to go to a bar without you because you care about her well-being and think that it's not safe for her to be there without you, then you are being territorial, right? So they distinguish the difference between, hey, Chastity, being jealous and being territorial in that way. And I thought that was a great one. Now let's do a step up from the territorial to protective, right? And making sure that you're not hindering that person from walking in their purpose. It would be like maybe someone, let's just say, maybe they're, the first thing that's coming to my head is pastor, but I don't really want to put pastor. But I'll use it because I can't think of anyone right now. So let's just say maybe the person, they're married to a pastor, right? Or even let's just say a counselor. And in, of course, their job, their purpose is they're going to have to, right, make connections with people to establish trust and things like that. So those people can feel that that person is safe for them to be vulnerable with and things like that. Now, if you have a person who feels or who feels a certain way once there is a connection made where it feels like, okay, there's genuine connection being made to this person, and let's say the person, right, if you're a counselor, you're not just counseling only one particular group unless you have said, okay, I'm only coaching men. But let's say this person hasn't said that and they're coaching women and men, right? And the person in their life, feels like, they're territorial over them in that way. And now that's going to hinder them from actually trying to, right, connect genuinely with that person just because they want to keep the peace I guess, in their home, which is really a false type of peace when it comes down to that, because we have to be able to really handle real issues and kind of hash them out and see where these things are coming from, right? So in that way, we don't want, in us saying that we're territorial over the things that belong to us, think that it belongs to us so much that we now thwart the purpose of God on that person's life. Real freedom is really having complete trust in God and in Christ. And like I said, the best way that you can protect your relationship is to, learn and have understanding about what the nature of love is and what the character of God is and really looks like in the relationship. And there's no way that you won't know, because the fruit of it will be the evidence in the relationship. The fruit is undeniable, right? We're not kind of living in our own bubble and where the principles and understanding that we're getting is not, right, unfolding in ways, realistic ways in the relationship. The fruit is going to be there. So, I think of my children that I have. Like I said, I can't be with them everywhere that they go. So one of the best ways for me to protect them is to teach them, right? Teach them some of the fundamental principles that I talk about on here. Teach them what true love really is. Teach them what the character of God. Teach them ways where they can discern. Teach them ways of how they can really pray to have God come inside, them, or be able to tune their ears in to hear the voice of God, because we all know that people can show up in as representatives and show us personalities that really aren't who they truly are. So you really do need the voice of God, the guidance of God, the wisdom of God, to be able to have a discerning eye, to be able to see through it and see the nature. And I think more importantly than focusing on seeing it through them is cultivating, right? Allowing the voice of God and the guidance and the wisdom of God to cultivate your character, because that's it, right? There's no way to get around that principle that you're going to attract certain people in your life based on who you are. So that's one of the best ways that I can offer protection to not only my children, but also my marriager. My marriage is to, right, what the Bible says, take on the character of Christ, take on the character of God, and have that produce certain fruits in my life that will afford for certain people to come into my life and either reflect that to me, that light back to me in certain ways, that we can either grow together, or if they're coming in another way, whatever attacks or whatever things or challenges that come, they're just going to sharpen me to be even better. But I can remain in my position, resting assured and trusting the process of God in it. So that's what we talked about tonight. So I think going back to our scenario, when the guy says to her that he's territorial, I think, if nothing else, she can maybe have an extra conversation with him to say, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? I think it's great. Like what her friend said, well, he didn't say he was jealous. He just said he was territorial. I think we would have to have a conversation to see what his understanding of that is and what the meaning behind it. And, further have a conversation that, okay, all right, that's no problem. I understand you're going to want to protect the people that you love. And I think that's pretty natural that all of us want to protect the things and cherish the things prayerfully, that God gives us. But we want to be keen and aware that we do it in a way, definitely always, that's guided by God so that we don't hinder that person from fulfilling the things that they're here to do, you know, on purpose, fueled by God's, So that is all, folks, for tonight. That's all we were talking about tonight. Difference between jealousy and being territorial, and how, right, we actually are to protect our relationships. What's the best way to do it? And like I said, over and over again, I'll keep saying it, is that you can't protect yourself better than love can. You can't. You cannot, because there's no match for God, and God is completely offensive. God does not play the defense, and for us to kind of love at our fullest potential, to our fullest capacity, we know that we're doing that when we start to have and see more patterns of us moving offensively through life, right? And not necessarily defensively. So you will be able to distinguish the difference. And I guess that's in my head. Don't get me wrong, territorial is not bad. Wanting to protect something that you feel is yours or that has been given to you. But I think what's above that is like what God said in the Bible, where it's like, okay, the commandment that he gave us as, men and women, which is to be fruitful and multiply, and take up territory, expand God's kingdom. And that is done more so offensively than defensively, So that's going to take a certain amount of courage. It's going to take a certain amount of courage, a certain amount of trust, and definitely faith, right? Yeah. So hopefully, I pray that tonight, in our conversation, there were some things that you can kind of take away with you, and prayerfully, hopefully, have some outside conversations with your people, see what their thoughts are. Maybe put out the scenario to them and ask them what they think the difference between being jealous and being territorial is. And maybe ask them, do they feel like they're territorial? And how can being territorial hinder a relationship, or hinder us wanting to be able to understand the truth about that person in your life is a gift that you have on borrowed time, and that they do have things that they have to do for God down here. So I'll leave with you guys on this last note, going back to that wonderful article that I read earlier on today by unleashlove.com, where she said her own example of being territorial, over sharing her own ideas, prohibited it, right? Just because she didn't want to share the idea, thinking someone was going to take it and not give credit. And that's so I could feel, I read it and I was like automatically convicted, because I've so been there, I've so been there. And I always, whenever that comes up with me, I always say, well, Sharla, you don't got copyright on this, right? God has copyright on all of these, right? Any idea that's coming through, like what she said, there's nothing new under the sun, right? There's just the continuity of God's truth, if it is God's truth that's being spread, and of course being filtered through the numerous amounts of his children in different ways, but it's the same truth, right? So I think there's freedom in her understanding that the idea needs to be spread. That was the whole point of it being there, and that that's more important, right? Than worrying about if someone's stealing it is that she'd have to put out, like, I wouldn't have found her article today if she didn't put it out. So it definitely spoke to me. It spoke to me on many different levels. And I can see how that would also tie into relationships, of us having the understanding that the people who God has allowed to be in your life, that they're in your life, but it's not just for you. It is for them to also serve others as well. Maybe not to the degree, right, or capacity. I'm not talking about in sexual connotations and things like that. Let's be for real. We all know, I'm not talking about in those ways. The vow that they made to you is to you. I'm talking about just them having to go out and serve, and connect genuinely with other people without you having to feel that them connecting with those other people in genuine ways to establish necessary relationships does not make you feel devalue, or make you feel that the connection between you two would be diminished because of that. All right, so great conversation tonight, guys. As per usual, I always want to give you guys some time, whoever's still on with me, to ask any other question. Doesn't have to be on tonight's topic. Could be on any topic that you like. So I'm going to give a minute for that. While I give a minute for that, just in case someone's typing. Of course, anyone, if you are new to the show tonight, if you heard anything that you liked, anything that resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and comment. If you're on YouTube, definitely join and subscribe to my YouTube channel, because it is the channel that has all the full videos. So you subscribe, you'll know when I'm on. And you get all the latest video and the full videos. The rest of the platforms, I only put snippets on. So feel free to do that. If you want to dive in a little bit deeper, specifically to your own relationship situations or goals that you have, I do have private clientele as well as a group membership. So feel free, if you're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, I think some of the other platforms, it's in the description. If you're on IG, click the link in my bio and you will be able to view or contact me in regards to any of those. All right, I don't think I see any questions. Want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Okay, nope, I don't see any. So thank you, as always, for those of you who popped in with me. Chastity, Ghost Rider, it's another one. Sparks, Emily, inspiring her. Hopefully I'm not forgetting some. Treasure, Latrice. If I'm forgetting anyone's names, I'm so sorry. All of you guys who popped in with me, thank you so much. As always, I appreciate your presence and your time. All right, but I am going to head out tonight. And as always, always remember to live to love freely. Until next time, guys. All right, bye.